You're listening to Autumn on the Air, the weekly podcast that brings you conversations about the impact of research commercialization and the people who make it happen. Join us for interviews with patent and licensing professionals, innovators, entrepreneurs, and tech transfer leaders on the issues and trends that matter most. Keep listening for an inside track on the people, IP policies, and politics changing our world.
Welcome to Autumn on the Air. Today I'm joined by Kirsten Leute to discuss best practices in supporting startups and fostering innovation. Kirsten is an exceptional technology transfer professional who has spent nearly 2 decades immersed in the world of innovation. She is currently a partner at Osage University Partners, where she is responsible for the relationships with more than 100 academic institutions that are partnered with the fund, engaging potential new partner institutions, and enhancing and creating value-add programs for the partnered academic institutions. Kirsten's expertise spans multiple prestigious institutions, including Stanford University and the German Cancer Research Center. Kirsten's dedication to the field goes beyond her daily work as an active member of Autumn. Her remarkable contributions were acknowledged this year when she received the 2023 Autumn Chairs Award. Welcome, Kirsten. I'm so excited to have you here on the air.
Thank you so much for having me. Always great to talk with you, Lisa.
Oh, definitely. And I'm excited to talk about best practices and startup policies with you today. And we have a lot to talk about. So, Kirsten, I thought I would kick things off by asking you your thoughts on the role of technology transfer professionals in supporting startups and fostering innovation. From your perspective, what do you think about the significance of their contributions?
Great question, Lisa. First of all, so I started in tech transfer what seems like a really long time ago now, back in 1996. And at that time, at least at Stanford where I started, our role in being involved or helping along the startups was a lot more subtle at that point. So the role has really evolved, and it's been one that is something and has made it very complex for people being in a tech transfer role because they have so many responsibilities now, a tech transfer professional. And so it's been nice to actually see the evolution now of new ventures, people being, housed within perhaps that technology transfer innovation partnerships office at the university. Two of the main roles that I see that tech transfer professionals have in supporting startups is the connections that they can make to help those startup founders get the advice they need, perhaps, some initial funding, let them, find some people who could help them out either as mentors or maybe some of their first employees. So there's a lot of connections that the tech transfer professionals have from their own ecosystem, perhaps geographically around the university, perhaps just outside of that in their local community, perhaps beyond that, especially today with how virtual everything is. Making connections to investors and mentors, et cetera, that may be in other states. So there's the connections. And then there's advice, because a lot of the tech transfer people have been doing this a long time. Sometimes they've known more startups than the startup founders themselves have known. They can potentially provide advice, like, here's what I've seen other startups do in this particular situation. So considering their own experiences, bringing that information in, and that advisory role that they have can be really of value to those scientific startup founders as well.
Well, and speaking of advice, you're a partner at Osage University Partners, so you work very closely with academic institutions. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of strong relationships between venture funds and universities in the startup ecosystem?
Yeah, and this is something that you've seen people getting closer and closer to each other over the last few decades. Obviously, some of the earliest investments that ventures investors made were, especially in the life sciences, were in startup companies that arose from technologies from universities such as Genentech and Herb Boyer at UCSF. And those relationships between the venture investors and the universities are important, in part because the venture investors can talk about what it is they'll actually invest in. What is it that they're looking for? What to them makes an investable venture? Is there something that the startup could be doing, or they could be doing at the university to make it more appealing as a venture investment? Is it that the potential end product, isn't as of interest to them? Or is there something that needs to shift on the team side? Or what are the next experiments that could be done to make it more of interest for venture investment? And so the strong relationships are important to make things more successful down the road, both for the opportunities that the venture investors see, but also those opportunities then being spun out of the universities.
Yeah, and I think for you, Kirsten, you've been on both sides now. I mean, you've been in a university tech transfer office. You were at Stanford for a number of years, and now you're with Osage University Partners. So you can really speak to, both sides, having, been on both sides.
Right. Yes.
So I also wanted to ask you, navigating policies and state and federal regulations can be really challenging and somewhat of a hurdle for startups. And having the expertise of tech transfer professionals can really make a difference in helping startups navigate this complexity. So based on your experience, what are some of the common challenges that you see startups typically encountering in this regard? And how do you see tech transfer professionals stepping up to help address some of these challenges?
Definitely. And the tech transfer professionals are sometimes the first ones, on the line with regards to these policies and regulations and helping them understand. So one of it is setting expectations and understanding this is, what you're going to have to encounter with regards to the policies at the universities or other kind of regulations you're going to have to deal with, and understanding that that's what the things are that they're going to have to deal with it, and just lay that out for them. So set it right up front and say, okay, here are the things that need to have happen in order for you to be associated with this startup that is spinning out of your university. And then I think part of that too then is for the tech transfer professional going in and understanding the goals that the startup has. So what are the main goals that the startup wants to accomplish in the near term? What can be dealt with in the future? And from that point, they can then say, okay, so these are the goals. Here's how we're going to get there, and setting up a path for that. And then setting up regular meetings to get those things accomplished, rather than perhaps just trading emails back and forth or just saying, hey, here's this piece of information, read it over. Sometimes you need to do a little bit more, perhaps hand-holding for those, especially first-time or newer founders with regards to what those policies and regulations are. And I see that tech transfer professionals in general do this really, really well. And they are very good about educating folks. And so I think my commentary here is probably not new to anyone who's listening, but just definitely pinning the point that it is so important for these startups to have those expectations set, and for someone to provide the pathway that they need to go down in order to get their startup through all of these, what are potential hurdles with regards to the policies at the university.
And I'm curious, Kirsten, given all your experience, what are some of the best startup practices that you've come across that have actually proven to be effective in accelerating the growth and success of early stage companies? And are there any specific ones or approaches that you found particularly impactful in this regard?
Yeah, so there's, it's interesting. I'd love to say that there's a one size fits all solution, but there isn't. And that's because each university is in its own ecosystem. You can try to look at the universities perhaps that you think are the most likely your peers, et cetera, and learn what it is that they're doing, things like that. But some of the things that we've found is that, that where people say that they have the most hurdles when it comes to startups is that they lack a network, they lack mentors, they lack training, things, in those areas, and they need to have, people helping them in each one of those aspects. And so lots of programs the universities have developed, whether it is their EIR or MIR programs, their proof of concept funds, things that, it's often a combination of these things all together that helps move the startup on. Those all have been, I think, very helpful, but it's not something that's just going to be a quick fix, and it's going to work for some, startups getting off the ground, but it's not going to work for everything. So just understand that it is something that is going to be hard, and making sure that people understand this is not an easy road to go down, and that it's not always going to succeed either. And sometimes you need to have those failures before you get to the point of success. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Kirsten, I wanted to go back. You mentioned mentors, and I wanted to get your thoughts about the importance of mentors for first-time founders and startups.
Mentors, I think, are one of the most critical pieces for startup companies, especially first-time founders. Let's put it that way. So that's one of the things that, for example, we're associated with the Equalize program, which is focused on helping women innovators at universities. We actually originally were focusing on women faculty. This next year, actually, we're including postdocs and grad students as well. But that was one of the main things that we heard from these women, was that it was really important for them to have someone that they could just go to and talk to for advice and understand what it is that they should potentially be doing next. And having that connection for a first-time founder in particular, sometimes even for a second or third-time founder, having those people that you can go and just ask any question to, and not be afraid of what it is that you're asking, and thinking, okay, this could be the dumbest question in the world. It's not the dumbest question. It's a question that you have because you don't even know what it is you don't know. And so having that person that you can go talk to, and it may be actually a cadre of people, like it could just, it could be one person for this aspect of the business and one person for this aspect, perhaps of the science, and It's important to have those people that you can go to and not have that fear of asking questions that maybe you think, oh, well, everyone probably already knows this.
So do you have some examples of some value-add programs or initiatives that you've implemented to support academic institutions and startups in your role there at Osage University Partners?
Yeah, sure. So, I mentioned the Equalize program that we're associated with. We're one of the co-founders of that program. We founded it along with Nicole Mercier at Washington University in St. Louis. And now we have just a huge number of volunteers helping us, including you, Lisa. So this was a program that we spun out. It's now actually into its own nonprofit entity. Some other types of programs that we have. So we do a lot of webinar series through OUP. We have one right now that is focused on funding and equity for university startups. So we just did our 5th installment of that. In the past, we did a Startups Licensing 101 series that was really walking through a license and the why are you doing a license? What does it mean? And then the different parts of the license, just so that startup founders could have appreciation for those different parts. When they were, dealing with a new startup license. We have a partner portal for our partner institutions that is chock full of startup tech transfer information. There's also a part of it that is also devoted to researchers and startup resources. So we have a lot of value-added programs that are all about, helping the startup community, in the hope that there will be best practices that people can learn from each other, and therefore get their startups to a better foundation of getting off the ground, getting those people into the startup that can help them with their endeavor, and then, of course, getting the funding as well.
Now, I mentioned before that you've had an impressive background. You've worked with prestigious institutions like Stanford and the German Cancer Research Center. So, Kirsten, can you talk a little bit about how your experience in different academic settings have shaped your understanding of startup policies as well as their impact on innovation?
So I'm going to answer this question perhaps a little bit more broadly. And because I worked at two very different places prior to joining OUP, and I worked in tech when I worked in tech transfer, is that you really have to understand your what it is that is currently in your ecosystem and where the holes are. Like, what is it that you particularly need to build or shape or whatever, or where perhaps and what are your strengths? So what can you build upon that are your strengths? And that can help with, potentially getting your particular innovations out. So I think that what my experience has taught me, again, and going back to what I said before, is that one size does not necessarily fit all. Yes, there may be certain policies that you have to do because, as an academic institution, you have decided that you are going to allow researchers so much of their time, right, to be able to work on startup companies, or you're going to allow them to have certain roles within those startup companies, et cetera. But some of that is going to be shaped by the local environment around you, and some of it is going to be shaped with just how you work as an academic center. And so understanding what it is that works within your ecosystem is really crucial for helping those policies and how that's going to help develop innovation in your own ecosystem.
Given that, what advice would you offer to tech transfer professionals who are eager to foster successful startup ecosystems?
Well, so I think my advice is, first of all, there's a lot of information out there. It's going to be like drinking from a fire hose. If you're trying to just gather information, that's a huge task. So, find people who've already put together resources, get that from them. Like I remember, I can't even remember how many years ago it was, the first institution put together their, startup guide, right, for their institution. And everyone's like, that's a great idea. We should all have startup guides. And so, but everyone, provided attribute to those who came before them and that helped maybe form their own startup guide for their own institution. So don't necessarily recreate the wheel. Figure out who has similar attributes to your institution and what's been done, and perhaps that will be helpful to you. But, absolutely, like if you're trying to perhaps change something about your ecosystem, look to those who you think, hey, we'd like to do something more like that. What could we learn from that? But you have to understand what it is, obviously, what your goals are and that you're trying to accomplish, and therefore then go out and find the information that's applicable to that after you've done that. I mentioned our partner portal before. We do like to try to gather best practices at OUP of the different institutions that we work with. So you can find some information there. But, this is one of the reasons that Autumn is so critical as well, is you're going to meet those people who have that kind of information and can help you. And that is one of the things that is most wonderful about Autumn is people are so helpful and they want to provide you their knowledge and their experience and whatever. So post a message on an e-group or, go into all the resources that Autumn has available. You are likely not the first one asking a question, but you may, but you could be. So go ahead and ask it. Again, don't have that fear of asking questions. And hopefully people can provide those wonderful resources that a bunch of them have.
Well, and I wanted to ask you now about underrepresented entrepreneurs and startups. How do you believe tech transfer offices and startup policies can play a role in creating a supportive environment for those individuals, such as underrepresented entrepreneurs and startups?
Right. Well, so number one is listening. So understand where there are barriers, if there is an underrepresentation. And so already there are underrepresented populations, right, in the innovation ecosystem. But how is their representation as far as participating in the ecosystem. So understanding that first is probably really important. So, okay, for example, if your female faculty population is 40%, are your invention disclosures, 40% from the female faculty? And then look beyond that. Okay, how many startups are being created? Like proportionally, understand what is going on there. And then you need to understand what the barriers are. So, some of us involved in this actually put together a paper a couple of years ago that we can at some point perhaps reference or put a link in when we post this. But we actually surveyed, I think it was around 150 to 160 women innovators at universities, and asked them about what were your barriers to getting to the next points that you wanted to go in your innovation journey. And so we outlined what the results of that were in that particular paper, but it goes back to some of the things we've already talked about: networks, mentors, funding, and time. So time's a huge one for a lot of people, is how do I even fit this into everything else I have to do? And so figuring out ways that actually makes it accessible, considering the populations that you're working with, is really important. For example, does everything have to be at night? Could it be like a late afternoon? Could it be, on a Monday or a Friday? That might be an easier time for people considering, what it is that they're doing otherwise. All the responsibilities perhaps someone has associated with their positions at the universities. There's a whole host of things, and then just creating recognition and ways that people are encouraged then to be able to take a part in the innovation ecosystem. So there's a lot more advice in I think in that particular paper. So I would encourage people to go read it. But there's listening and providing access to the training, mentors, network, funding, et cetera, is critical.
Absolutely. And the time issue is one I've heard others talk about, the challenges trying to find the right time for certain groups to be able to participate either as founders or, whatever it might be. So, Kirsten, I wanted to ask you, are there any emerging factors or changes on the horizon that you believe will shape the way tech transfer professionals and startup navigate policies and regulations?
This is an interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a terrific answer for it. It is, and here's why, is that, and maybe it's different. So I've been out of tech. I'm not, working day to day in tech transfer now. So I've been out of it for almost 8 years. And the fact of the matter is that as a licensing professional, only a certain portion of your job is actually focused on startups, right? So when I was at Stanford, I think the number of versus all of our licenses every year, startups accounted for something like 15 to 20% of our licenses. Maybe it was 10 to 15. I can't remember exactly. It was around 15%. And so it is just a portion of a licensing professional's job is the startup part of aspects of it. But it seems to me a huge increased focus. There has been a huge increased focus on startups, obviously within the profession, but also from outside of the profession as well, right? People see these as economy generators, as ways that potentially we're going to make more of an impact because of these new products getting off the ground. And sometimes it really is the only path available for certain technologies to make it, to that potential of having an impact. So for me, that what I have really enjoyed seeing is getting people in who have experience with the startup companies and helping them, be it the new ventures people, these MIRs or EIRs that we've talked about, hiring people to come in and perhaps do some of the contract work that needs to happen for these innovations to take the next step. So other things that they've been doing a lot around helping these startups potentially be more successful as they get down the road. But I think one of the things that I'd just like to say, is recognize the fact that that is just one portion of what the Tech Transfer Office is working on. And there's still a lot that can be done. Obviously, a lot of work that is happening in these other areas as well. And so I think that what we've seen is that companies themselves have become more interested in startups, more interested in working earlier with the university, whether it be through collaborations, sponsored research, these overall agreements. You see venture investors also being more involved in the earlier stages of research, becoming more involved in perhaps these proof of concept and accelerator funds or gap funds, other things that are helping the innovations along this journey and getting beyond the valley of death, or like I like to call it the valley of innovation death. I call it the void, because you don't want things disappearing in that void. You want things, like perhaps they need to die. The weakest should not be moving on, but getting things beyond the void that shouldn't have to languish there.
Well, thank you, Kirsten, so much for sharing your expertise and insights today. It's been an absolute pleasure to delve into the world of startup policies and learn from your wealth of experience.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Autumn on the Air with Lisa Mueller. Get social with us and share your thoughts. You can tweet us at AUTM or visit us online at autm.net. We'll be back next week on the air. Be sure to join us.
New to tech transfer or a seasoned pro? Autumn is the global member organization for tech transfer and is here to help you get connected, get smart, and get ahead. Whether you work in academia, research, government, business development, corporate engagement, or startups, Autumn is dedicated to supporting you through education, advocacy, networking, and promotion. Join and you'll receive 20 free live webinars, as well as meaningful discounts on meetings and courses, insider access to a vast network of colleagues to help you through challenges, and align on new technologies and the university decision makers who license them. Membership is open for 2023. Join us.